But we've been, basically this entire year, like the banner says behind us, we've been kind of titled the year Breakthrough 2023. That's kind of what we're sticking with. I think we're going to ride that out probably for the rest of the year. But last Sunday, my father, he talked about how to affair-proof your marriage, and he asked me to speak today. And so he gave me a list of topics and stuff, and I figured since I don't have kids, I probably don't need to tell y'all how to raise your kids. So it makes more sense for me to talk about marriage since I'm married. I have a little bit of experience in it. But today we're going to be talking about how to get your spouse or partner to listen to you. Wouldn't that be something? I'm pretty sure you're the one that needs to listen. I'm calling this message, Listen to Me, Listen to Me. And first service, I got out of I haven't played the drums, and I've been letting all the young guys play the drums. I got out of the drum cage first service, and I had pulled a muscle in my shoulder. I was like, man, this is terrible. I've lost it, y'all. I ain't got it no more. I sounded good, but I'm hurting. I'm hurting all over. I almost called Levi and said, hey, bring your stuff. You might have to play second service. That's terrible if you get injured playing an instrument. That's pretty sad, actually. But I pressed through. Michael Jordan's flu game ain't got nothing on me, okay? This is beyond that. But what if I told you today, that there are ways to speak to people that almost guarantees that they will listen to you? 60% of the time, it will work every time. Okay, I told y'all I'd get that in. I told them I was going to do an Anchorman reference at some point during the sermon. So that's the little things that I try to do in second service. That's for you. You're welcome. So today we're going to be kind of focusing on one scripture. If you should have sermon notes. If you don't have sermon notes and you need them, raise your hand. We got ushers back there ready to go. I thought that this was, I don't usually do sermon notes, but I thought it was a kind of message that honestly I wish I would have had before I got married, because I was terrible when we first got married. I didn't understand anything. I thought I knew. I had no idea. And I have a feeling that some of y'all, the things that we talk about today are geared more towards married people, but it can be applied. You can take the principles and you can apply it to a dating relationship and just family relationships in general, or people that you care about. You can use these steps. So Proverbs 15:2, this is what it says. When wise people speak, they make knowledge attractive. They make knowledge attractive. What I'm going to do this a little different than I normally would. Since you have notes, we have 7 steps to having a difficult conversation with a spouse, relative, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and give them to you, so you can go ahead and fill them in. Then we're going to go back so you can listen a little bit better. I want you to soak it all in, okay? I want you to really get it. Number 1, you have to choose the right time. Choose the right time to have the conversation. All right, number 2, plan your presentation, okay? That's a big word, presentation. You can look at your neighbor if you need help. Plan your presentation. Number 3, begin with his or her needs. Begin with his or her needs. Number 4, probably most important, listen first. Listen first. Everybody tracking good? You good? Do I need to slow down? Are we good? All right. Number 5, say it positively. It's also a big word. You can look at your neighbor. Number 6, clarify your conclusion. And number 7, end with an encouraging note. End with an encouraging note. Now we can go back and we can start fresh and dive into each one of these points. So the first step that we take when we need to have a difficult conversation, I'm not talking about we're looking for an argument. Let's say there is an actual issue going on in your life with a spouse, somebody that you care about, and you need to have those tough conversations. Anybody ever had to have one of those super tough conversations? You have to pick the right time. Has anybody ever picked the wrong time? I have picked the wrong time many times. I'll give you an example of me picking the wrong time, and this isn't even in my marriage. This is just in general. So if you come to this church, most of you know probably that me and my wife are going to be moving this summer. We're going to be moving to Tennessee, and don't act like you're going to miss me. All right, we're moving to Tennessee. My wife got into anesthesia school, which is extremely hard to do. I'm very proud of her. It's actually, statistically, it's the most difficult medical school to get into. Most schools only take like 5 to 12 is the class size. So she got into a school in, it's called Union University in Jackson, Tennessee. And so I was like, that's awesome. We're going. I'm going to be a kept man when this is all said and done. Hey, don't be afraid to let your wife make more money than you. I ain't got a problem with it, okay? It's all good to me. So whenever she got into school, we got home. We found she did an interview. We came home, and they called her the next day. She was one of the first people they let in. And so I was very proud of her. And then one of the first things she says, she goes, how you going to tell your family that we're moving to Tennessee? I was like, ooh, that's going to be tricky. That's going to be tricky. So I told her, I was like, well, I'm going to tell my sister first. Me and my sister have always been close. I'm going to, talk to her first. We've always had a good relationship all throughout our life. I mean, she was a weird kid. She used to get on my nerves. She was one of those little girls when I was like, we're about 4 years apart. So I'm like 10 years old. She's 6. And I'd walk by her room, and she's talking to people that aren't there. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, we need to, take her to a doctor or something. But it used to drive me nuts. And my dad said, he has a younger sister. He said she did the same thing, and it drove him nuts. So I guess it's just the price you pay of being a big brother. But I talked to her, told her, about us moving. Of course, it was a little bit of an emotional conversation. It's not like one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I just got to get out of here. It wasn't that. She was like, well, when are you going to tell mom and dad? I'm one of these people that I like to get it over with. Like, I don't like to drag out a difficult conversation. So I was like, well, I'm going to tell them next week. On Monday, their day off. They're off on Monday. Even better, they're watching Linux, right? So all these steps that I've given you, I pretty much did most of these except the choosing the right time. And I blame Marissa. I'll tell you why I blame Marissa. So I had it all planned out, what I was going to say. I had it in my mind. Me and Marissa, I don't think Josh was at work that day. I told her, I said, well, when you go pick up Linux from their house, let me know, and I'm going to go talk to them. So what Marissa didn't tell me is that Dad was sick. Now, my dad, when he's sick, he ain't very friendly. Most people aren't, She did not tell me this information, that he was feeling bad. So I text her. I was like, hey, you got Linux? Are y'all on your way home? She's like, yeah, you're good. Come on. That's the way I'm looking back on it, taking this conversation. Because my dad was sick, and I go in there, and I've got all the stuff in my head, and I didn't read body language, and it wasn't the best conversation, but we ended up working it out later on. And I told him in first service, because I knew he was watching, I was like, don't get nervous. It'll be all right. I ain't going to tell too much. But we ended up working it out, but I chose the wrong time, and it's her fault. Had everything planned out, but I chose the wrong time. Don't drop bombs in your spouse's life right before bedtime. That's a terrible time to be like, you want a good night's sleep, and they just drop a bomb on you. You're like, what is wrong with you? Like, I love sleep so much. Like, why are you going to ruin my sleep? I don't think y'all understand. Like, I've been thinking about the nap I'm taking when I get home today. It's already in my mind. I love y'all, but I got a nap going in the back of my brain here. I'm so excited about it. You don't even know. I've got my windows blacked out in my room and everything. I've already got my thermostat set to 65. It's waiting on me when I get home. I'm so excited. But why would you mess somebody's sleep up? Okay? Choose the right time. Also, another terrible time to drop a bomb on somebody is right before you leave for work. Why would you do that? Like, don't ever say to your spouse when you're leaving for work, be like, hey, we need to talk about something when you get home. What is wrong with you? No. You can talk about it when you get home, but don't do that to them. Why would you do that? Did you know that most violent arguments come right before meals? It's true. People are hangry. They ain't happy. They're hungry. So my recommendation is if you're going to have a difficult conversation, make sure somebody's belly's full. They're a lot more, I can take bad news better on a nice full stomach. If I'm hungry and you got bad news for me, probably not going to go very well. So make sure, and this is one of the things that I like to do, we got to go to Tennessee this week to look about for houses and stuff like that. I know that all I got to do to make my wife happier is if she's upset about something, I just keep snacks laying around, and I give her something. So we got a 10.5-hour drive to Tennessee this week, and I've already got snacks in my truck. Because I know at some point I'm going to have to hand her a snack and be like, here you go. Hand her a Snickers or whatever. You're not you when you're hungry, But snacks, keeping snacks on hand, guys, I'm telling you, this is just a side note. Keep snacks on hand and give them to your wife. It really helps out. But make sure somebody is nice and full before you give them bad news. Or just in general, you guys understand what I'm saying. Choose the right time. You can kind of fill out the situation to drop difficult conversation or bad news. Number 2, plan your presentation. Proverbs 16:23 says, intelligent people think before they speak. What they say is then more persuasive. How you introduce a subject can make or break communication. How you introduce it can make it or break it. One of the best ways to start a conversation, a difficult conversation, is to ask leading questions, okay? And you got to ask leading questions that don't imply judgment, okay? That's very important. So I'll give you some examples of bad questions to ask. Let's say that one of the two of you is like you're a neat freak, okay? The other person is messy. Most of the time, couples are opposite. Sometimes they're both the same, but it very rarely seems to be that way. And you're the person that's, the neat freak, and you're going to talk to them about how messy they are. And you say, this is something you don't say. You don't say, look, I know you're up for a promotion at work. I think we can afford to hire a maid now, don't you think? Like that's like a passive-aggressive type thing. That won't go very well. Don't do that. I'm not saying I've done that, but, don't do that. Or let's see. Let's think about something else. Maybe you are, you don't like that you're not intimate enough. You're not having enough intimacy in your marriage. Probably don't say something to the effect of, are we going to have sex before the end of the next 3 or 4 years? Probably not the best way to say it, okay? I can guarantee you if you say that, you're not getting anytime soon, okay? Don't lead with those kinds of questions. One of the biggest problems I think that I've had when it comes to having difficult conversations or being in arguments with my wife is that I don't have, if it's something that is an issue that I'm trying to point out, I don't have examples on hand. And I think the men will understand what I mean in just a second. My wife is extremely intelligent, obviously. She was originally a pre-law student, so she's really good at arguing. It's unfair. Like, I consider myself a pretty smart person, but she's like, she will destroy you. Don't ever try. And it seems like like I said, I like to get stuff off my chest. So if there's a problem, I'm not the type of person to let it stew. I'm like, let's discuss it right now. Let's get it out there. I like to sleep good at night, so I ain't trying to have all this stuff build up. Get it all out there. So I will immediately bring up the issue I'm having. And her response is, well, when has that happened? Give me an example. And I'm like, the other day? Give me a specific example. And I can't because I ain't thought that far ahead, okay? Now, I'm not telling you to sit back and have your little notepad in your back pocket, and when your wife is ticking you off to pull it out and write it down, time stamp it. That's not what I'm saying. Because when they find that, they're going to murder you, number one. But it's a good idea whenever you're planning your presentation to have examples of times that person has made you feel that way or the issue has come up. I've never done it, but I think it'll probably work if I try, okay? So have some examples on hand. And those examples are not meant to hurt the other person. They're just meant to reinforce the issue that you're having with your relationship. Number 3, the next step is you want to begin the conversation with his or her needs. With his or her needs. Ephesians 4:29 says this, speak only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. If you put the needs of your spouse or the person you are talking to above your own, this will almost guarantee you an audience. I'm not going to say that you're going to get the response out of them that you want, but they will listen to you if you begin with their needs. And it's kind of like what's happening right now in this room. Everyone is thinking right now as you're listening to me talk, why should I listen to what he's saying? Why should I listen to what he's saying? Everybody thinks this in every conversation you have. You may not realize that you're having this kind of little tug of war in your mind about whether you should listen or not, but it helps to tell the person why this will benefit them. Tell them why this will benefit them. One of the things you could say, this is an example, and this is a pretty good one, I think, is let's say that you're having to have a difficult conversation. You tell them, you'd be like, look, I just wanted you to know that I think, we have a problem here, but I think that whenever we resolve this issue, I think I'll be an even better husband, and I know it's going to be hard to believe, but I think even you can be a better wife. Say something like that, and I bet you it'll go a little bit better for you, okay? Begin with their needs. We do this when we build messages for you guys. One of the things we do is we come up with a problem that most people have. We tell you why you need it fixed, and we try to present it that way so you listen to what we have to say. You're more likely to listen to what we have to say. We preach to application here. That's on purpose. We want you to not just hear it, go in one ear and out the other, and leave and have no change in your life. We want you to hear it, think about it, take something from it, apply it, make your life a little bit better. Anybody know or have you heard of what's called the RAS, center of the brain? Anybody ever heard of that? It's called the reticular activating system. It's basically a filter that keeps us from responding to every stimulus around us. People that have autism, this is something that doesn't function properly for them. So right now, if somebody that was highly autistic was standing on this stage, these lights right here would be too much for them to handle. It's too much of a stimulus for their brain. Whenever we have Night to Shine, we have like a long line that we make where people come in and we're cheering for them and stuff, and sometimes people come in with headphones on because sensory overload is a thing for them. And for people that have normal functioning brains, there are only 3 different things that can grab your attention outside of normal everyday stimuluses that are going on in your life. The 3 things are, number 1 is threats. Second thing is things we value. And the third is things that are unique. Now, when it comes to your spouse, I would not use a threat to get their attention. Okay? I don't want to hear about somebody at Cross Point got murdered by their wife this week. I would not advise threatening anybody. That's not a good idea. Things that are unique in the context of what we're talking about, trying to have difficult conversations, doesn't really apply. It's not something new per se, because most of the time they're aware of the issue that's going on. But things that we value, our relationship with each other, that will grab their attention. So begin with their needs. So we've chose the right time. We got the right time. We've planned our presentation. We've decided to lead with talking about how this is going to benefit our spouse, our partner, and how it's going to just help our relationship. The 4th thing is this: listen first. Listen first. Write this down. Communication is a dialogue, not a monologue. Communication is a dialogue, not a monologue. Proverbs 18:13. Listen before you answer. If you don't, you are being stupid and insulting. I love that's just so blatant, and I love it. So blunt, it's great. If you don't, you're being stupid and insulting. The Bible is really awesome sometimes, Listen first. Men, listen to me. Listen to your spouse. It is very difficult sometimes. I consider myself a decent listener, but sometimes there's just too much talking. Okay, I'm just going to be honest. My wife gets home from work, and she loves to talk. I love to listen to her. And I pray that she's at work right now, so I'm hoping this is the one time she doesn't listen to me preach. But she'll get home, and I'm into the conversation for about 5 to 10 minutes. And it's not that I don't want to listen to her. It's just that my brain just eventually just floats off in another direction. It's really difficult to listen past a certain point. This is one of the things that me and Josh and Mark have kind of discussed when it comes to teenagers about how long they should do devotions at Squad. You got about 10, 15 minutes max to hold their attention. And that's if you're real good, okay? And sometimes I feel like my attention span in certain situations are way less than that. Have you ever been in an argument with somebody, a spouse, somebody you care about, and you were so set on making your point that you didn't hear a word they were saying? Yeah, I've done that quite a few times. You're sitting there and, you know, it can be difficult because I'm, number one, one of the great things that my parents did, they did good stuff with raising us, I think, but you can ask Marissa this, we rarely heard them argue. Now, come to find out, they did a lot, but they didn't do it in front of us, which is awesome. But when I got married, I didn't know how to argue with anybody. Like, I needed to hear something, you know. And, you know, me and Stephanie, when we first got married, we'd get in some arguments. And, man, she's so good at it. I'm terrible at arguing. But it's like, I'm like, I've married like a genius or a psycho, one of the two. You know, it's kind of what you're thinking. But there's been times that we're not screamers and yellers, at least not when we argue, but we're not screamers and yellers in conversation. But that was for the religious folks. If I made you uncomfortable, it's probably ain't the church for you. That's really light for what happens here sometimes. So my dad said way worse last week, way worse. It's bad whenever I'm the chilled out one. What is that? But I'm not. We're not. We honestly we don't yell and scream at each other when we get in arguments. But there's been so many times that we've had like really intense conversations, and I'm not listening to a word she is saying. I'm just preparing the next dig I got. I'm like, yeah, I got you. Here it comes. Here it comes. And I remember one time she was like killing me in an argument. This was probably within the first 2 years of our marriage. And the only thing I could think of was to say, your mama. Because I ain't got nothing. I mean, I feel like that hurts most people's feelings, you know. That's how you know you ain't got to come back. I was like, your mama. That didn't help. That made her more mad. So I was kind of like, yeah, there you go. That was the right response. Your mama. But listening is key. Most of the time, I bet if I could be the referee or sit back and watch a big argument you've had with your spouse, if I could sit back and watch, most of the time, when you're really heated, both of you actually want the same thing. You're just not listening to each other. You're not listening to what the other person is saying. The communication and listening has went completely out the window. James 1:19 says, be quick to listen and slow to speak. Studies show we only hear about 20% of what is said. 20% of what is said. And this goes for like anything in my life. So a couple years ago, I finished my master's degree, and I swore that I would never do anything else. And because we're moving and stuff, I have a lot of IT experience, but I don't have a lot of certifications. So I was like, I got to get some of these IT certifications knocked out. So I've been studying for all these stupid certifications. And if you've done any kind of IT stuff, you know about Professor Messer. Like, he does all these videos. And I'm sitting at home. My wife works a lot. I'm sitting at home watching these YouTube videos. And before I know it, like 4 videos have went by, and I don't remember anything that happened. I'm like, got to start over, go back. Because I can't, it's like my attention span is just, I'm focused for like 5 to 10 minutes, and then it's out the window, out the window. We listen with our eyes. You know we listen with our eyes? Body language. Anybody know anything about body language? Only 7% of communication is our words. 7% of communication is our words. 43% of communication is the tone of your voice. My wife, she can call me, and I can say, hey. She's like, what's wrong? All I said was, hey. Something was wrong. She knew. It's like my tone. She knows my tone of voice. The remaining 50% of communication is your body language. Has anybody ever had somebody that you're talking to? This is usually women, I'm going to say, for the most part. You're talking to your significant other. You say, hey, how you doing? I'm good. Nostrils flared, death stare. They're not good. Their words are saying they're good, but everything else is saying no, they're not good. So the body language, we need to learn to listen not just with our ears, but with our eyes as well. Step 5, now this is your turn to really talk in this whole thing. You have to say it positively. Never typecast yourself as the teller of bad news. You don't want to be that person constantly. My mother-in-law, my wife is from a very small town in Georgia. We say she's from Mayberry. But it's really funny to listen to their conversations they have on the phone. And my mother-in-law, her name's Penny, she's kind of become she's typecasted herself a little bit as the bringer of bad news. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this exact conversation. Stephanie will pick up the phone. Her mom will go, "Hey, do you remember insert such and such?" And Stephanie goes, "Let me guess, they're dead." She's like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" That's all you say is when somebody dies. And we laugh about it, and it's not funny that they died, but you're like, it's immediate. "Do you remember so-and-so?" "Well, they're dead." She has become the teller of she's the bringer of death, my mother-in-law. I hope she don't listen to this either. The bringer of death. And we laugh about it, but every single time, they're dead. But learn to say things positively. Even difficult conversations can be handled in a more positive fashion with the words we choose. Learn to be realistic and optimistic at the same time. You can be realistic about the problem you're having, and you can also be optimistic about the outcome of it as well. Okay? So, Proverbs 16:21 says, "A mature person is known for his understanding. The more pleasant his words, the more persuasive he is." Write this down. I'm never persuasive when I'm abrasive. I'm never persuasive when I'm abrasive. It's very difficult to persuade somebody to listen to you if you're being a jerk. Trust me, I know. Okay? I think a lot of us have figured that out. Did you know that there are statues of people all over the world who have spent their lives being criticized constantly by people? There are statues of people that have been criticized their whole life. But have you ever seen a statue of like a film critic? No, they don't exist. People don't like a critic. You don't get accolades for being a critic. Don't be the constant bringer of bad news. And the conversation may be bad news. Do your best to spin it in a positive light. Do your best to spin it that way. You're more likely to get somewhere and make a difference and change in your relationship if you do. In our relationships, it seems like we spend so much time on the diagnosis of the situation and very little time on the prescription for the problem. We talk about the problem all the time, but we don't do much to fix the problem. Constantly diagnosing but never prescribing a solution. Number 6, after we've done this, and this is the part that I am terrible at, clarify your conclusion. Philippians 4:2 says, "Agree with each other in the Lord." This step gets missed and is why issues keep reoccurring. Has anybody ever had a difficult conversation with a spouse or somebody, and 6 months later you have the exact same one? Exact same one, over and over. It's a recurring theme in your relationship. Odds are you didn't clarify the conclusion. You didn't figure out what the next steps were. Sum up the conversation and the steps you are going to take to fix the problem. Don't be vague. Being vague in this situation is a big no-no, okay? So it's kind of like this. If somebody, let's say somebody in your relationship spends way too much money, or you guys are in, I just saw a head shake. I'm not going to say who it was over on this side. But somebody spends way too much money, and you have to have that difficult conversation. The conclusion can't be, well, we're going to spend less money. That's super vague. How are you going to spend less money? You're going to stop spending on the credit card. You're going to lay out some steps. Be specific. Each person should walk away from the conversation knowing what the next steps are to fix the problem so this doesn't keep happening. There's been issues in my marriage personally that have kept recurring because we didn't put a plan in place or steps. We didn't know what was going to happen to fix the problem. So many times, I'd be willing to bet when a husband and wife have an argument or a difficult conversation and it ends, or we think there's resolution, the man walks away going, all right, we're good. And the woman walks away going, oh no, like what's going on? I feel like nothing has changed because nothing has changed. It just, we got our problems out there and we didn't talk about how we're going to change it or how we're going to fix it. Vague statements, something like this. Let's say you don't want to say, hey, I want you to come home early. I want you to come home early tonight from work. You usually get home around, 7 o'clock. I want you to get home early. That's too vague. I say, I want you home at 5:30 Eastern Standard Time. On the dot, okay? Or, this is a very vague statement. I found a great sale today. That's vague. We need more specifics. I've heard that before. Found such a good sale today. The more specific statement is, we're over our limit. Don't use the Visa card. Okay? That's really what we meant. Or, here's another vague statement. You might need gas. You might need gas in your truck. That means you're on empty. It drives me nuts. Every time I get in my wife's car, I hardly ever drive it. It's on empty. I'm like, are you riding around on empty all the time? Every time she gets in, every now and then I let her drive my truck and to work or something if she's driving far away because my truck's newer. I let her drive it. Guess what? It's always on full for my woman. Her gas tank is always on empty for me. It drives me nuts every time. I'm going to have this conversation. I'm planning my presentation right now. I'm working it out in my head. I don't think it's going to go well. So you don't want to end it without clarifying the conclusion. Put active steps in place to make sure that this does not become a recurring problem. And finally, the seventh step is end with an encouraging note. Proverbs 12:25, a word of encouragement does wonders. End the conversation on a high note. You have to end it on a high note. Even if the discussion gets heated, even if you start arguing, even if somebody raises their voice and there ends up being a little bit of yelling, or feelings get hurt, you have to end it on a positive high note. You need to end the conversation. You can write these things down if you want to. You need to end the conversation by reaffirming a few things, 3 of them. Number 1, reaffirm your commitment to the marriage or the relationship. Reaffirm your commitment to the marriage or the relationship. Now, one of the worst things you can do is have this big blow up. You clarify the conclusion, all this kind of stuff, and you don't end it by letting them know, hey, things are going to be great. We're going to get this fixed. If you had this terrible argument, let's say you followed all these steps, and you go through this, and it gets real heated. It gets rough. Some mean words are said. You tried to do your best, but some stuff got said. If you don't end it reaffirming your commitment to the marriage, there's going to be doubt that creeps into the minds of your spouse. You need to just cut that off at the source. Say things like, I know this was a difficult conversation. We're going to get through this. It's going to make our marriage even stronger. I'm looking forward to getting past this with you. Say things like that. That will, especially if you're a man, that will really help your wife feel a whole lot better about an argument you just had. Dudes, men, I'm giving y'all all kinds of stuff. I really hope that you're listening, okay? I'm listening. I'm going to try some of them myself, okay? Second thing, reaffirm your love for your partner. You should always end a tough conversation or an argument talking about how much you love your partner. If you don't, you're missing an opportunity. You have to. Reaffirm your commitment to them. Tell them how much you love them. Third, you need to reaffirm a sense of optimism. You need to tell them, look, even though we're having this problem, we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it together. We're going to be able to, we've got our steps laid out. We've got a plan. Whatever the issue is, we are going to get through it because we have each other. Say those kind of things, and I bet you some of these issues that you have that keep recurring, they probably get resolved a lot quicker than what you would have originally thought. Now, I gave you 7 steps, right? This doesn't apply to every single issue in your life. These are for the big things, okay? Now, if you wake up in the morning and your husband was snoring like crazy all night, you don't need to be like, all right, so what's the right time to talk about this? If you're my wife, she just punches me in my side when I'm asleep, wakes me up. I've been hit with pillows, all kinds of stuff. But the big things, these are for the big issues that you're having in your life. Apply these to the difficult conversations. Some of you have difficult conversations that you know you need to have right now. And I'm hoping that you're listening to what I'm saying. Now, everything I said isn't going to make it any easier. It's going to probably make it a little bit harder because you're going to have to really think about how you want to present the situation to your significant other. But if you follow these steps, I truly believe that you'll get more clarity, you'll get further in your relationship, and you'll have more resolution of your issues in your marriages. Amen? If you would stand with me and bow your heads and close your eyes. This isn't one of those, come to Jesus messages where everybody gets saved. I understand that. But I think this is one of those things that even if you're not married, if you think maybe one day you will be married, if you're in a serious relationship, if you got people in your life that you care about, this is something that I believe can make a significant difference in your life if you just apply the principles. I'd like for you to take these sermon notes home, put them somewhere where you can see them every now and then, put them in your car, in your glove box, somewhere. So that every now and then, whenever life gets tough and you have to have a difficult conversation, you can reference this. Because I believe if we learn to be better listeners and communicators and talk about how that we're going to get through things with our partners, that our lives will work out so much better and then we'll have so much more peace in our marriages. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Lord, at Cross Point, I feel like that we do a really good job of addressing all the different areas of the family dynamic. And God, I pray, Lord, the married couples that are here today, I pray that something I said will sink in, even if they take just a small fragment of something that was said and apply it to the difficult conversations that they have to have. Lord, we want to be the most well-rounded we can when it comes to our relationships. And we want to put you at the center of everything that we do, Lord, because I know that if you're the center of our life, you will help us figure out the right time to have these conversations and to plan the correct things to say and be attentive to the needs of our spouse. With you in our lives, we're able to walk out the things that we need to do, that we can be a better example to not only our spouses, but our children and the friends around us. We thank you so much for that opportunity. In Jesus' name we pray.